This is the Holy Gospel according to St. Luke, the 9th chapter. Glory to you, O Lord. Now, about 8 days after these sayings, Jesus took with him Peter and John and James and went up on the mountain to pray. And while he was praying, the appearance of his face changed, and his clothes became dazzling white. Suddenly they saw two men, Moses and Elijah, talking with him. They appeared in glory and were speaking of his departure, which he was about to accomplish at Jerusalem. Now Peter and his companions were weighed down with sleep, but since they had stayed awake, they saw his glory and the two men who stood with him. Just as they were leaving him, Peter said to Jesus, Master, it is good for us to be here. Let us make 3 dwellings, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah, not knowing what he said. While he was saying this, a cloud came and overshadowed them, and they were terrified as they entered the cloud. Then from the cloud came a voice that said, This is my son, my chosen. Listen to him. When the voice had spoken, Jesus was found alone. And they kept silent, and in those days told no one any of the things they had seen. On the next day, when they had come down from the mountain, a great crowd met him. Just then, a man from the crowd shouted, Teacher, I beg you to look at my son. He is my only child. Suddenly a spirit seizes him, and all at once he shrieks. It convulses him until he foams at the mouth. It mauls him and will scarcely leave him. I begged your disciples to cast it out, but they could not. Jesus answered, You faithless and perverse generation, how much longer must I be with you and bear with you? Bring your son here. While he was coming, the demon dashed him to the ground in convulsions. But Jesus rebuked the unclean spirit, healed the boy, and gave him back to his father. And all were astounded at the greatness of God. The Gospel of the Lord. So in the last few weeks, we have finally been able to find contractors who are willing to talk to us and give us bids on the patio courtyard area that the congregation approved doing a couple of years ago. We've got one contractor in particular who we are confident will do a good job, and we are now in the process of getting a basic proposal ready for council in the next couple of weeks. Now, personally, as some of you know, I always enjoy doing projects like this, but I am especially looking forward to this project, but not only because it will transform the muddy mess between the fellowship and the sanctuary doors into something usable and nicer to look at. In fact, I feel like this project could be a transformative moment for us. After a time when we have been apart due to COVID, and when we've all had our routines of worship and fellowship disrupted, actually developing a warm, inviting space to help us rebuild community and fellowship with one another could not come at a better time. And I realize that as we've been thinking about this project over the last couple of years, this really isn't just about patio or a construction project. It's really about new ideas and new visions for how we can learn and worship and build community with each other and with others in our community. I mean, as we started to look at some plans and to think about possibilities, I realized, wow, I could run theology on tap out there. We would actually have a nice place, and especially now that the lighting is good out there, we would actually be able to sit out there in a pleasant place and really have some new events like that. I remember one time during COVID, I watched a women's book group, and they had to sit outside in the middle of the parking lot, and they were having a good old time, but would have been so much nicer if they had a nice place where they were close to the kitchen so that they could refill their wine glasses and things like that. It would be a great thing. We were looking at some more possibilities, and I'm here a lot of the time when in the evening when the NA groups start to gather, and they're always trying to find some place to not lose their footing, because they like to be able to be outside and gather together with one another. We share this space with others in our community. And the more I thought about this project, the more I thought about the new possibilities that we would all have to be able to gather and have fellowship and to share this with others in our community. It's about vision. It's about new ideas. And as I thought about those new ideas, I realized this space is really about experiencing excitement over those new possibilities, which after so many depressing things have happened over the last few years, and as depressing things still happen, because this week we're thinking, oh wow, look, some of the mask mandates are lifting, right as we're all watching the news about how Ukraine is getting invaded by the Russians and there's a war again in Europe. It's like the depressing stuff never ends. But after a few years of all that depressing stuff, it's good to have something else, to feel some excitement and enthusiasm and hope for the future again, to be reminded that the bad things going on are not all there is. That's partly what this is about. And because of that, this project is about getting energized to move forward and to do new things, to actually give me the kind of feeling of, hey, this is worth getting up and doing something new. Which again, after simply needing to find ways to get by for a long time now, is a good experience to have. I was on a Zoom meeting with the conference pastors a couple of weeks ago, and one of the pastors, she was talking about some of the things that are going on in different places, and she said, I just feel like over the last couple of years, I've just been trying to keep putting one foot in front of the other and keep up with all the things that I needed to keep up with. I just haven't had the energy to really try to do anything new. And I'm right there with her a lot of the time. And this is a project that's actually given me a sense of, hey, I've got some energy to try something new. Of course, like any transformative moment, I am sure that the things that are going to happen will not change overnight. We need to get this project done, which will take a little while yet. We need to actually try some of these new things and learn what does and doesn't work. And we need to wait and see how some of these new opportunities will guide and affect our life as a community. Because like anything else, there are times when we've started something new and I thought, oh, this is going to be great. And people go, yeah. And there are other things where I'm like, oh, this isn't going to really make a big difference. And people are like, wow, this is cool. So we're going to have to see which things are which. But it won't happen overnight, or even in just the next year. That is the way transformative moments actually work. And it seems that that is how the transformative moment on the mountaintop with Jesus worked in the lives of his first disciples as well. In our gospel reading today, Jesus was literally transformed before the eyes of his disciples. It was a transformative moment for them. And it's clear that that moment for them was also about seeing Jesus literally in a new light. They had their eyes open to new ways of seeing things, new ways of seeing Jesus, and therefore new possibilities of Jesus that they probably had not envisioned before. I mean, before this, they had followed Jesus around. They had listened to his teaching. But lots of people followed rabbis around and listened to their teaching. They had seen some really miraculous things that Jesus had done. But there were other people who apparently did some miraculous things as well. But now in this moment, God was showing them that Jesus was more than that. That there were bigger possibilities that they probably had not envisioned. And clearly, that moment was part of opening their eyes to new visions and new possibilities, even if all the details weren't there yet. This transformative moment on the mountain was for the disciples also an experience of excitement and hope for the future. Because surely they were scared out of their wits. Most of the gospel writers, like Luke, point out that when Peter starts talking, he doesn't know what he's talking about. He's just going and he's kind of clueless. But it's clear through all of this that they were excited about what God was doing in their lives. They wanted to be part of it. They had hope and excitement in spite of the fact that their lives, like ours, were filled with all kinds of problems and pain. They were living under Roman occupation. It was not a fun time for them. But they saw in that moment that the pain and the problems were not all there was. And they could get excited about what God was doing, even and especially in the midst of the problems. And it's clear that that moment on the mountain was also, and maybe this was Jesus' most large intention here, was to get them energized and strengthened to follow Jesus in new ways. And they were going to need that strength because as they came down the mountain and they followed Jesus, they were heading to Jerusalem. They were heading to the cross. This was about following Jesus on a journey that was not always going to be fun and happy. But that transformative moment was part of what gave them strength. It was part of what geared them up to be able to keep moving forward and to do some new things instead of giving up and going home. Yet, all of this change, it didn't happen at once. Indeed, as our gospel reading continued, they came down the mountain, and the very next scene is Jesus being exasperated after the disciples are having the very same problems they had just a few days before. You know, teacher, I brought my son, and I asked your disciples to do this, and after all this time, your disciples couldn't do a thing. And Jesus is like, oh, come on. Haven't you guys learned anything yet? It didn't change them overnight. But that transformative moment was what helped them to continue on the journey. It helped them to continue to learn, to grow. It gave them new vision. It gave them new strength. And it helped them to be able to continue to become the people that Jesus called them to be. It helped them to continue on that journey, a journey which did not end at the cross or even the empty tomb. It continued for their whole life. Transformative moments can help them to do that. And so this week, as we begin our Lent journey again, a journey of following Jesus to the cross and to the empty tomb, be alert to these transformative moments that God is giving you in your life. Sometimes those moments may seem deeply spiritual or even mystical, like that scene on the mountaintop. Sometimes transformative moments may seem like construction projects. And often, transformative moments may not be noticed by anybody but you. But whatever the transformative moment is in your life, or whatever those transformative moments are, God's purpose is always to give you vision and new ways of looking at life and what God is doing in your life. God's purpose is always to give you hope and excitement for what lies ahead, so that you are not totally weighed down by the problems and the pain that continue to surround us all. And most of all, God's purpose is to give you strength and stamina to continue to follow Jesus on a journey which may be hard or confusing, but which ultimately leads to resurrection